Meet Rachel, a business consultant, a lead generation expert, a marketing leader who's got a lot of expertise in the region, and just a really, really nice woman colleague that I like to talk to. I'm having her on my podcast show. A year ago, we recorded an episode in a little bit of a different context. Then I went into podcasting myself. And today we're going to talk about lead generation and how it has evolved in the region, and a lot of things about PR. And I think it's going to be a very valuable piece for you if you are in marketing and looking into lead generation. Hi, Rachel.
Hi.
Thanks for passing by. And I think, what was it, probably a year and a half ago we spoke.
Yes.
In a different studio, but
Yes.
also discussed marketing.
Yes. It keeps coming back.
It's
a never-ending conversation.
No, but I'm so excited we met again. And I think we have a very hot topic to discuss today. And I know you've been in lead generation for several years as your own business, as a consultant, as a business consultant here in Dubai, coming from also a corporate career, probably, or a company career. So I just want to combine your combined expertise into my B2B marketing show so that we could bring that conversation about lead generation and how it has evolved over the last years, and what value we can bring now as businesses.
Great. I'm here. I'm excited to be here. It's so fun to see the show and be a part of it.
And so let's start from business consultancy that you're doing, just to build a little bit of a foundation to what clients you're working with, what kind of business consultancy services, and what are you up to?
Great. So I've been basically established the Biz Advisors, which is a consultancy, but it's based on advice, right? There's a lot of startups, medium-sized businesses, and they just need the right direction. So whether it be coming into the region and or going into a new region, and how do they build this lead generation connection to their customers? Now that's a lot for a business, especially a small, medium-sized business, whereas a enterprise business has a lot of more resources. So how do you prioritize where your marketing money goes to drive those new conversations with people and convert them to really sales? And a lot of time that comes to two big challenges for businesses and what they have to overcome in any relationship. It's about credibility and trust. So I'm helping clients build that credibility and trust so they can drive lead generation and have an easier, seamless experience to get into closed revenue for the business. And sometimes it's individuals, sometimes it's businesses, and but being able to support them and drive their priorities and their roadmap so they can achieve this and get it done is kind of my forte.
We meant lead generation 8 years ago as getting telephone calls, or getting telephone numbers or registrations during the events. What do we mean under lead generation, or what is a generated lead in 2022?
Well, I think it's just gotten more complex. The avenues of driving those leads have multiplied. We have seen this digital growth that's been exponential. It's basically exploded. So now this is where the big challenge is. Do I spend my time doing digital marketing? Do I spend my budget on lead generation through digital advertising? What kind of lead generation can I actually expect? What can I receive? And what is that customer journey once you touch that customer for the first time, and where they are in the awareness of your brand. So I think lead generation is one of those keywords that you just will find for the rest of time, because that's how people can identify, I need money. Right? I need money. I need to get leads. My salespeople, business development need to focus on getting those leads and or customer and that touch point to a person. And I like to say it's not B2B or B2C. It's really P2P, which is people to people. How do one person at your organization touch another person to ideally drive some revenue and have a conversation about business?
Yeah, agree with you. And I've heard something. I wonder what you think about it. Say, when we speak about lead generation nowadays, we're actually talking about creating demand for your product or services or for your brand as such. What do you think about it? And let's talk about what it means to create demand. What kind of tools can you use? What are the attributes of creating demand in 2022, in your opinion? And what do you think? Do you think this is valid? Lead generation means creating demand?
I think there is something that's very cohesive about it. And I think creating a demand is not as easy as it sounds. Right?
Oh, not at all.
Not at all. And there's really two parts of this conversation. There's like, I always like to use this analogy of fishing, right? You need bait to fish, and especially in the Middle East region. So now we talk about more regional expertise. You go to any customer today in the Middle East, the first question that they'll come back to is, who else are you servicing? Right? And so you could reach that person. You may be able to reach that person, but convincing them that you are the right person to utilize for their needs is a whole nother probability, right? So this becomes, are you hunting for the lead, or are they coming to you? And I think that's where you create this demand where they start coming to you. But how do you create that demand?
How?
It's so psychological. And I think the psychological part of it never changes, right? We're humans, we react to certain things at the same kind of way. And when it comes to sales, most people are driven by what they can gain versus what they can lose. It's very simple, right? There's a polarized, attraction that comes with any kind of closed deal. And it's based on a couple of these human behaviors and what drives us to actually buy, right? And so that's why I say it becomes like a more conversation about the psychological components and driving factors of humankind in general.
I agree with you. So how do we apply the human element of creating demand into your brand marketing? Let's say into a marketing of a B2B brand. Is it actually in the brand? Is it within the brand, or is it within marketing, or is it somewhere in between? When you have to bring up that human element into the entire picture to make sure that you connect with exactly the clients that you're bringing value to.
Well, now we see a lot of automation, a lot of AI, a lot of components that become more of this digital space. I mean, look where this whole NFT space is going. What's going to be the future of marketing? Are we going to be marketing through third parties in the digital space? We're already into that digital space to reach them, but how do we convert them and so forth? Will we be having, sales professionals in the digital space to be able to do those jobs one day? We don't know where it's actually moving towards. So this agile adaptability is really important to be able to understand it's not just a brand. It's no longer just a brand. It's actually, I think as we continue to evolve, brands are getting bigger, right? This whole like commercialism and development of brands they're just grabbing other brands, and they're getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But really the essential components of any kind of sale mechanism is coming down to the individuals, and that's why I keep on coming back to people. And I'm seeing this transition more and more where businesses today are now focusing on the customer experience and that personalization to really stand out against the competition, right? And so again, to go back to your question, is it a brand? Is it a product? Is it
marketing, or is it somewhere in between? How do we incorporate that human element into, I think that's the challenge, right? How do we incorporate, because you're right. Creating that demand contains a lot of human element relationships. So it stays the same. It's just that the amount of tools and the way the conversion is done nowadays, it's different, right? So it's a lot in the digital space. It's a lot through automation. It's a lot through different other channels. So how do we bring that relationship and that human element into that space? That's what basically we were discussing. So is it between the brand marketing? Is it somewhere else? Is it content? How do we bring that human element into that space, into organizations?
And that's why I say marketing is becoming so complex, and depending on the size of business, you're going to see, if there's a salesperson that's responsible of both the marketing and the sales, they're going to struggle, right? Because how do they prioritize? But it becomes very simple. The end result is to close business and to convert, right? Which means that there needs to be a human element to that to be able to drive that connectivity. Those other marketing elements are just touch points to remind you, hey, don't forget about us. We're here. We're here when you need us, when you do need us, right? Because it still is that person to qualify their need. And I always like to talk about the lead generation is just a human that may be a decision maker in the long, and in the final product, but there may be influencers, especially in a B2B play. There's going to be a lot more other people involved, and how you reach out with your messaging and connect with them multiple times becomes how much budget do you have? Right, because it's a supporting function.
Do you think influencing in the B2B space, in the B2B marketing, and specifically in the tech area, for example, do you think influencing or tech influencers is a valid channel for bringing in the human element? I'm just asking for your opinion. So what do you think? Do you think it works, or there are more efficient channels in your opinion?
Well, I'm a big fan of the channel marketing. I'm a big fan of that purely because that cuts down that marketing funnel in half, because you got people with those personal relationships that you could, leverage, which is huge, right? If you're going ice cold into a space and you want to rely on an influencer, I think that B2B and when it comes to IT is very limited. You don't see a lot of influencers in the IT space.
Well, at least that's why I'm just wondering if it's something, if this space is going to evolve at all. I mean, one thing when we're talking about SaaS solutions, I think that is a different way to market technology solutions. When we're talking about traditional B2B spaces, like IT spaces you mentioned, there's still a lot of traditional marketing, and probably channel marketing is one of the areas that really helps a lot to B2B brands to be successful in their lead generation activities. When it comes to this region, so let's know, what do you see as key challenges and key benefits of doing a B2B marketing, and specifically the lead generation activities, creating demand, etc.?
Are you, do you want to focus on IT segment specific?
Well, it's just because I'm coming from an IT segment, and it's just easy to talk about it. But I'm always very excited to take experiences from different industries and see how they can be applied in a space like IT, for example.
So IT is very, specific, and with over 10 years IT experience, I always love to talk about IT as well. And I think that's where we connected, because our expertise and history, being in that space. There's a very interesting segment here of opportunity and challenges that is presented. And specifically, I refer to the big vendors. Right, they have an entire department set up for that channel marketing and channel leveraging into a distributor, or resellers that are marketing or selling to the end customer. It's great for scalability. However, the marketing funds behind that has a big challenge. Your vendors have, high paying, or at least resources on the ground that have KPIs. Those KPIs are give the money out to our partners and get that money to drive lead generation, which sounds great. Who doesn't want free money? But the idea is that we're talking about resellers that don't have marketing teams. They have a salesperson, and that salesperson would rather spend their time connecting with the customer on the telephone, through meetings, than being able to figure out digital campaigns I could leverage it's a completely different job, expertise and utilization of his knowledge, right? So what you're seeing is there's a whole bunch of MDF funds that are sitting there that they're not being utilized. They're not being utilized because there's nobody to utilize them. They don't have the time, they don't have the resources, and there's quite a heavy duty auditing component that comes with, especially the big vendors. So being able to even get that money back is challenging. It may take time, for those partners to actually use those funds effectively. Not only that, but those funds are usually awarded on a quarterly base, right? So given that, then you lack a whole nother problem, which is inconsistency.
Yeah.
It takes enough time to actually reach out to the customer. But once you have them, you got to hold on tight. Because guess what? There's a whole bunch of competition out there
Yes.
that wants your clients, right? And everyone's going for the same people. So if you're in IT, for example, you are looking at, you need the IT managers, you need influencers, you need CIOs.
yeah.
Guess how many people
Exactly.
in this market are trying to reach that same person?
I like it.
And
yeah.
it's saturated. It's absolutely saturated. So how do you get those leads? You'll be able to get them. It's just going to cost you more money. You know, it's going to be a lot more competitive, and keeping them and keeping you know, top of mind is going to be a lot more challenging because everybody's going for that same demographic, which comes back to the problem at hand. You can't do it only once every year for 3 months and think that that's enough, you know?
So the solution is the consistency. I mean, if we are talking, so you've just identified the challenge that is very typical for this region specifically. If you agree with me, right? So
Yeah.
we've got money that is not being utilized or utilized only occasionally, and the entire market is running after the same kind of
Segment.
profiles,
Right.
Right. So if we move a little bit towards the potential solutions or potential innovations in these spaces, what would that conversation be? I'm not telling that we need to sort of work out a solution out here, but at least to start that conversation on what can be done to make it work better, to make it more innovative, to change something specifically in this region.
Yeah, well, I think the ones that are going to excel are the ones that really understand how powerful their personal brand are and their value proposition to the market, right? Because those people that are working on their individual brands and the organizations that see how powerful it is to leverage the expertise of their staff digitally are going to be the ones that you're going to see really gain the majority share, purely because that connectivity is always there, and that touch point is always there, and you're using your staff to be able to utilize that touch point and do the marketing, you know, and that hypnotizing, you know, a part of the marketing that is required to be top of mind, right? I don't really see that. Maybe there's softwares that are going to be supporting that, you know, that can help, but it's again, it comes back to the psychological components of humanity, which is you need to have that messaging happening over and over and over and over and over again for people to remember you. And you're seeing the biggest brands spend the most amount of money on marketing because that's what works, right? That's what works. Even bad marketing, even bad press. You know, I think Michael Jackson would be first to say in his grave here that, you know, even bad marketing would drive sales, right?
Yeah, because it creates, it does create an awareness and a word of mouth or whatever.
It's top of mind.
It's just that I think if you think about what brings more business is actually the value that you're bringing as a brand. And I'm discussing a lot of that when I talk about marketing with sales leaders, for example, with technical people as well, and with marketers as well. The thing is, when we're talking about the bad marketing, probably a hype that people are often using to sort of, to grow their audiences quite fast, etc. I'm not sure how efficient it is for a brand, but it definitely helps to grow the audience fast. Let's talk about events, for example. Events have sort of traditionally been a marketing activity that brings a lot of leads, that generates a lot of hot leads. How do you think events have evolved already and should evolve in the future? Should they be hybrid, physical? Do marketers need to get more creative in terms of what bring to their stands? What is the secret behind events that should work in the current era we're living in?
So I think, if the whole world saw all of a sudden a wake-up call, COVID, no events, what do you do? How you drive lead generation, right? And that's where I saw a huge drive. And I really pivoted my business to all of a sudden help people, hey, let's build websites, make sure you're visible digitally so that you can excel and you could still be here because you are what Google says you are. So if someone goes to any business and understands or Googles a keyword for that problem, they're going to have people that pop up that are be able to solve that problem, for example, and they'll be able to actually cross-reference who the person is that I'm meeting with. Do they even know, are they experts in this field or not? Can I trust them? And again, we're going back to that credibility and trust. So the best thing about the event space is it becomes very segmented. You're going to pay top dollar, but you're going to get the segment that you want to touch, which is great. And depending on the event organizer will depend on the variables that they can support you with. So can they give you a database, because that will start that journey of creating your strategy of getting those touch points to the right demographic. And so events provide a great solution for that. Where the future of that is going is now we see it's hybrid, but there's no doubt people have gotten exhausted. They've gotten exhausted with the Zoom components of events, right? The traction of attendance ratios have even actually diminished quite regularly. And so there's a small little spike happening now that Dubai is back, for example, and the post-COVID kind of restrictions are a lot lowered. People are coming out. They're coming out and you see events, recently I've just went to a fintech event, Seamless, packed with people. You see they're out, they're dying for this connectivity. Right? And so even at an event, you can still have that great probability of meeting the right people. They're there.
But percentage-wise, for example, if you look at, let's say, even 5 to 6 to 8 years back, because events, especially for small businesses, it's an expensive thing to invest into.
Yeah.
So would you, as a small business, invest into a big event, a big industry event, let's just be specific, or let's say in a 6 months podcast show? For example, I'm just looking for the alternatives.
Right.
Are there do we need to think about alternatives, or we just need to keep on with what traditionally has really worked well for marketing?
Well, that comes to a bigger conversation, because that's kind of where my value is for my customers. There's a lot of things to consider. How do they decide what is the right channel? And so that question specifically, should I save, $15,000 and go into promote at an event? Let's say, for example, be a speaker on a stage in front of my target demographic, potentially walk out with a new database, get leads generated that I can have follow-up conversations. Or do I market my value proposition, customer testimonials, interview kind of my staff profile, exactly some of the expertise within my organization, and use that to market, right? Or to get out to somebody? You got to pay for something. Do you have a database? Do you have a newsletter? Do you have advertising revenue, or do you have money needed to advertise that content? How are you utilizing those content? Because at the end of the day, the goal is the same. You want to convert to sales. And so prioritizing those two opportunities really comes down to where a consultant is required to really analyze what you need to achieve the results you need that you're trying to, to actually achieve, and what you desire. And so if you don't have money, where would your priorities go? It would go for that lead generation to be able to have those sales conversations.
Yeah.
Right. But those sales conversations, guess what? Anyone who is considering a product or service is going to cross-reference you now. And so it's actually becomes more of a disability if you don't have substantial content to support your credibility and trust. So it's a two-way street here. And so can you, maybe invest in some video content for a period of time so you have enough so that you can go to that show, that event, and have enough credibility when you get there to follow up on these meetings, to nurture those contacts, because you need the contacts, but you need content and nurturing stuff to be able to nurture them until they actually are at the bottom of that sales funnel or marketing funnel to drive the sales.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's all about, but do you agree that we didn't talk about content marketing that much 5 years ago? Even 5 years ago, I can't, 5 to, 6, 8 years ago, we wouldn't talk about content marketing as one of the core marketing tools. We did talk about messaging. We did talk about, branded content a lot, but we never took content as a tool that is able to bring a human element into creating that demand, into that marketing activity, into that marketing plan. We never used content as that powerful tool, and we just realized the power of the content, I think, in the recent years, where the amount of digital just showed to us, if you're not becoming a human in your digital space, you're not going to get that connection with the
Absolutely.
audience.
Absolutely. And I think that's the biggest change, and what we're seeing is this evolution of, businesses in general focusing on that content creators, right? They need that traffic because people are connecting to people. But TikTok is one of those platforms that just is like disrupting that whole industry, because now it's not about influencers that have millions of followers. It's actually about the content itself. Right? Because brands are going to be able to then hashtag a brand, and a brand can decide to boost a post based on some guy or girl that may have created one fabulous piece of content, and have 0 followers. Right.
Yeah.
So we're seeing that evolution of where that content creation is going. I think it's a mandatory component of any marketing. I will analyze any client and tell you, based on your content that you're able to share, priority is to go video, because that's what people are connecting with. We have video everywhere. So we, go with that, because that's the way people are connecting. You're seeing conversions of engagement skyrocket just by putting a picture of a human. You're seeing it multiply when you see video. You're seeing that engagement, but guess what? They're not hour-long engagements. We're talking about small micro content. And again, it comes back to touch point. So would I spend my money on a digital platform to drive lead generation if I have the wrong people following me? Absolutely not. Mm-hmm. Right? But would I have that content so I could drive conversations to a targeted demographic that I'm trying to reach, whether it be at an event or after buying a database, or on LinkedIn, after starting the conversation and doing that email nurturing and communication? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Right. So that's why I say it's really like looking at a business on a holistic and having a holistic approach to understand where they are and where the missed opportunities are, to really utilize the available funds of, that they have in the way to give them the end results. And so content creation is very exciting. Yeah. Right? Because people are not utilizing it as much. And you're seeing these brands starting to understand it's not just the marketing department.
Definitely not, because I think the entire organization has to adjust the processes to fit in things like podcasting, for example, or a video creation that is based on a value versus the money that is invested into creating that video, if you know what I mean. So the biggest thing about video nowadays is that it has to be authentic and bring value versus the amount of money that has been invested into creating that video for 3 months, and then it gets outdated, if you know what I mean. So that has changed. The requirement for new content, for content, has changed so much that the organizations in the B2B space need to adjust their processes to be able to integrate that.
Absolutely.
And I do face it a lot in the conversations that with brand people, with marketing people. A lot of brands are facing the issue of how to integrate the process of content creation into their current organizations. So that's something that this change is about to happen. If not happened already, or for some prominent organizations who have managed to integrate it into their processes, I think they're much ahead of the game from content creation perspective.
Absolutely. I agree. I see how it's this paradigm shift happening. I think we're currently experiencing it. It's like the ripple effects after COVID, because people are recognizing how important it is. Then you're seeing these tangible results and how it's impacting the bottom line, right? But, we're dealing with siloed departments that may not be communicating together. But I say, in an ideal world, what would I advise any business to make sure that they have a video production team, at least on site, so that they can utilize as much content as possible to share it as frequently as possible to the target demographic that they want to reach out to, right? Because that's really what's happening. It's become so competitive that you need to have that strategy as a minimum foundation for your communication to your customers and to your internal staff. Right. So you're seeing departments communicate internally to keep everyone on board, because the highest expense is if a resource leaves and goes somewhere else. So you want to keep them engaged. You're seeing organizations actually profiling their sales people, not only just their C-level CEOs and the guys running the show, but actually the people inside the organization, because those stories, that's part of the storytelling journey, and people are going to connect to them. And it's again, it's a touch point. So if you have lots of content, you can create so much content, right, around the actual organization. In an ideal world, you would. And then you actually also include that communication about the customers that you're touching and highlighting those customers and the relationship that you and those customers have and the results that you're able to achieve, because that's what your next customer is going to get. And the best, over and over again, we see the best form of marketing is word of mouth. Yeah. Right. So the influencers, are leveraging that because they're putting a brand. But I think people have gotten too smart. If I see an influencer pushing a brand, I know they're getting paid for it. So all of a sudden I don't trust it as much. Right. So there's a distrust that comes with it as well, as opposed to an authentic experience. And if you're able to leverage customers that are utilizing and finding success in what you're providing, there's nothing better than that.
What do you think? How is Dubai and Dubai brands are positioned to integrate the content creation processes into their structures, in your opinion? Is Dubai and the brands who are actually having operations in the Middle East, or probably wider areas that have been covered from Dubai, let's say, how is this region positioned from content creation perspective? Are we in a weaker position? Are we in a stronger position? Do we have a potential to grow here as well as content creators, for example? So what would be your view on that?
Absolutely. We have a global reach now, right? So it's about how businesses are utilizing it. And what I'm finding is that I think there's going to be a big shift in the agency play, right? Because the big enterprise companies are spending in agencies to build that communication channel, right? And in most cases, agencies are just outsourcing it or firing a supplier, and then utilizing this entire media, planning to incorporate all these different channels, and videos becoming a mandatory component of that, right? And so being able to utilize it as a service, as an added value for an agency is kind of where that shift is going to be. So it's more accessible, and they're content creating more regularly for their clients, right? And it's not, it's interesting. I was here selling radio advertising for Gulf News. Mm-hmm. I worked for Radio 1, Radio 2, and it was part of Gulf News, a publication. And it was just, and there was a interesting component here, because I was asking people to pay for radio advertising, right? Which is very unique. It's just one channel of the many to advertise, right? It's a segmentation, there's listeners, and how can you differentiate between brand building versus conversion to sales? And really the conversion to sales is not necessarily something there. It's more of a branding exercise. But what is there is, things like brand recognition when it comes to giveaways. Right. Mm-hmm. So then the giveaways is based on someone will touch your brand, mm-hmm. and someone will experience your brand, and they will be able to share it with their friends. Mm-hmm. Right. The word mm-hmm. of mouth marketing can really cause a ripple effect, but with that, it's audible, right? It's not visible. Mm-hmm. Not visible. So they're missing that component of that visibility, And again, it's great. It's there. It's a touch point that's there that people need. However, you're going to see this. I think the radio industry is going to change, and it already has, because now they're streaming live on these other social media channels to get this connectivity with their faces behind the camera. People we never saw before on radio are now all over the internet, because they have to be. And so that shift is happening. And so you'll see it with the agencies, you'll see it with organizations, because they'll say, I don't want to invest in the agency to build that content. I could just do it right on site. And we've seen, solution providers like Casvio, for example, exactly. that will set up a studio at your office, and you can tape as much as you can. They got that as a resource. So it's like an extra arm. It's, for you internally.
Yeah, I'm always thinking about Castvia, because I think it's just such a great offering in terms of how do you even take content creation from mindset perspective. It's just a content that needs to be created all the time. And I've recently been asked a question about a video production strategy for a B2B brand. And the question was basically on how to make it happen within the brands with, let's say, executive leaders who are constantly sort of, to be able to get an executive to record a video, that's a work to do. Like, executives are busy people, and marketers are in a constant, I think, game of, okay, so I need to pull all these topics together. I need to do a great research. I need to just prepare that conversation and give it to my executive so that he could, and then there's the whole bunch of approval things, and then you have to just show it to everybody before it gets into a camera. Which brings me into thinking that the mindset has to shift in terms of what we allow, like executives and leaders. It has to be a more natural and more easy way to produce a video. If you are setting up a little studio within your office, like you have a mic and you have a camera constantly setting up there should be a certain circle of people authorized to just come there and talk about their expertise. Do you agree? So without the whole bunch of approvals that are required to create that video. And that is a mindset shift. People need to value their own expertise.
Yes, absolutely. And I always say, I do some free courses about like becoming the celebrity you're truly meant to be, and I find the biggest challenge that people have is they don't know how to promote themselves, especially busy executives that, like, I'm too busy to sit there and keep on promoting my value proposition to the world. They're just like, I feel uncomfortable. A lot of people feel uncomfortable. And that becomes another problem in the organization. Who is going to be that face that's going to pull that information out of that? So in an ideal world, there would be some person that's content creator that's responsible of gathering all those interviews within the organization and building all that content by, and being able to pull it out of people, because I don't think it's naturally easy, and this comes down to another one of my, special products, which is basically how do you sell yourself? And I'm finding myself managing and overseeing salespeople that are not selling themselves properly because we never learn that. It becomes, it's not just a business paradigm shame. It's actually an education in general. Like, this is the most important tool in the world.
Yeah, so you just need to understand that you as an expert, you as an executive, you've got an expertise already that can be shared as it is. Yes, you just need to know how to.
How do you share that?
Exactly.
What do you say? How do you say it? How do you deliver it? How are you selling yourself? That's really what it comes down to. And so that's just one part of it, but it's going to be every person in the organization needs to go through that, authorization, I guess, approval, maybe it's even certification of like getting everyone to go through a certification to be able to sell themselves, because brands are going to all of a sudden see themselves going, oh my God, feeling a little nervous, going, I got to trust all my staff members and what they're going to say and how they're going to present themselves to other people.
Yeah, it's a question of brand standards, etc. There are many processes that are affected by this little change of putting a microphone in a small office where you can constantly communicate and create content as a brand. But that touches so many things.
Yeah, there's a lot of part of it.
Yeah, that need to change. And I think it all starts with the mindset. The shift has to happen in the way that people need to first start valuing their expertise, like and they need to understand that content is actually what you are doing on every day, on day to day. It's not something exclusive that needs to be created for 3 months. Minimum, right?
Right.
This is something that is happening in your business every day. That's what's content.
Absolutely. And it could be, there's so many different areas of content that you can create, right? But I think there should be a foundation of expertise, what's your value, what's your history, and why are you doing what you're doing?
Exactly.
Right?
What value you're bringing to clients, what's happening in the client's meeting. I mean, to a certain extent, it has to be controlled. We're not talking about things that
Are confidential or anything,
confidential
right.
has to be exposed. I mean, we all understand the boundaries to what you can, but I mean, obviously, what you're doing on a daily basis, bringing value to someone because you're an existing business, and that has to become a content, and that's the key shift that has to happen in the minds, and that's what I think gives a lot of ways to things like podcasting, interviews, cost view offerings, etc.
Absolutely. I mean, I see publishers contacting me just to go and interview high-level guys. Just the other day, I went and I interviewed a couple guys in the finance industry, CEO, managing director. I'm there. I finished my interviews, and I'm just asking them questions, about who they are, what they're doing, and what's their roadmap, and what people should be looking forward to their product offering and stuff. And then I said to the marketing person, I said, let's interview some more people. Let's get some more people. There's a great opportunity. You got a camera? I'm here to talk. Let's find out some more, and let's talk to you. You're a marketing professional. You work for the business. You have ideas. You have expertise. Let's share the world. And she's like, no, only, only these guys. I said, really? And I feel like for me, that's painful because I'm it's a missed opportunity. And that's someone who's paying top dollar to have a camera on site with microphones and lights at an event. And they're missing an opportunity, a huge opportunity. So where does that change?
I like that we're talking openly about that, because I think that's the whole point. I mean, you have to articulate first why there's a problem with content creation is because we simply do not create it. We do not do anything as organizations to be able to absorb these new trends where it has to be easy.
Yeah.
The process has to be natural and easy. If we need to train people to be able to do that, we need to start with training. We need to, it has to be part of our job descriptions, right?
It should be. And you're right. There's a bunch of parts of it. And it just made me think for a second. I remember a client I was training them about personal branding and how to leverage their team. We had 20 guys in a room. We talked about their LinkedIn, how to use it effectively for driving. So many people are using Sales Navigator, right? I'm wondering, I would love to know the conversions of how many people accept an in-mail from somebody they don't know, who've never connected, that are clearly just contacting them to sell them
something.
Right? Because it happens to me all day, every day. I don't respond to any one of them.
No.
I don't respond to any one of them. So I can't imagine this conversion being very, very high. And so it's a great product offering. I'm sure LinkedIn's making millions, but what's a conversion for the sales guy? I don't know. I don't think it's just a one-off, conversation that actually does a conversion. However, the CEO of the business, what his response was? He goes, I wish I knew your content that you shared with them, because now everyone has everything they need to go find another job. And I said, well, that's an interesting way of looking at it, because if they share content around your business and their expertise with your business, they're promoting your brand constantly.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think there might be even a fear of the unknown, especially for an older generation, of what's coming. Right. But I think this is coming. Well, I think, so that's what we're talking about, our region. I think globally, the shift has happened. I'm not sure, but it's just a lot of effort as well. On top of your regular job, for example, showing up out there as an expert with a proper content on LinkedIn, for example, or whatever, on a channel or platform of your choice where you feel comfortable, it's an effort. Well, it has to be, and it has to be sort of evaluated. It has to be taken into consideration that people are getting out there, out of their comfort zones, putting the efforts to create even a small video, and it has to be appreciated somehow, I think, from employers' perspective. So again, we're coming back to the fact that the shift has to happen across many different areas. Departments, yes. Departments and leaders have to be making those changes, or else it's not going to happen. But like I said, for me to train a whole bunch of people how to utilize a tool that's being utilized for sales effectively, and have a leader in an organization feel at risk that he's losing, that he could be potentially at high risk of losing staff members by, by them promoting who they are professionally and maybe recruited or potentially leave the business, is a very interesting challenge to have, because now it's like, at what point do you have faith and trust the process, and what point do you have fear and you prevent it from moving your business forward?
Yeah, that's right. It's all about, like, do you have to take this direction and better invest into a proper training or practicing? It takes culture.
It's a cultural shift. That's exactly what it is. And, and there's obviously many components to do that. But, if I was to project like what I think the future holds, it's going to be every organization has a video mandatory department that they are creating that content. Now, whether or not those restrictions are based on one individual, kind of like that PR approved individual, a number of different visuals, maybe there's a list of 5 different people minimum. So you have multiple touch people within the organization, and some standards of how to utilize social media. I mean, now for businesses to hire into anyone, they're usually going through your social media accounts, right? They're seeing what you're doing. They're seeing what you're doing personally. So you can imagine there's a very thin line. It's starting to merge between that personal world and that professional world. And I think that's probably the biggest challenge for most, is that now being so digital, we don't have necessarily, it's not so easy to just turn off. It's all the time, right? And not being all the time, either brands will decide they're going to leverage that continuous 24/7 accessibility to their customers and utilize it effectively for the best conversion through video, or they're going to miss out, and they're not. And their competitors will. So that becomes a decision on the table.
Yeah,
right?
That's true. How marketing organizations need to evolve in the current era to make sure that they continue bringing the same value or even higher value. How do they need to evolve from functionality perspective? So what are the attributes of the marketing organization that you think have to be there in the next 5 years, for sure, for the organization to be successful?
I just think there has to be a big differentiation between branding efforts versus sales, right? And what you're seeing is, brands will require marketing, right? You need assets built and so forth, so they have some content. Then there's branding of where you're going to put that content, and then the actual sales efforts for lead generation, which we come back to, right? Because we're creating all that content for the leads, right? And then what becomes a bigger conversation is the quality of that leads, right? And that's, I think, a marketing agency can do a great job creating the most beautiful brands, messaging, content, and so forth. But then if the actual business itself is out of touch with the sales conversion, qualifying the sales properly, communicating to the sales properly, being able to understand their pain and consult a client. And we're seeing this emotional evolution of like how professionals need to be able to engage. And I think maybe that's kind of where those marketing agencies are going to be successful, when they help bridging that gap between the sales and the marketing efforts, because you're invested in the actual end result. But what's happening is you're doing all this work. I see it over and over again. You're doing all this marketing work, all this build, all this advertising, and then it gets to the sales guy who completely screws it up, right? And it happens over and over and over and over again.
So I like to raise this sales and marketing partnership question a lot, and I talk to sales leaders and I talk to marketing leaders, so we could kind of build that. We can bridge that gap. We can build that partnership instead of constantly sort of trying to chase different things. Eventually, everybody is running after the revenue, and bringing that value to the client and get revenue as a return to that. I think we've pretty much covered the question of go-to-market strategies and how it has changed. So it requires a lot of human element in the digital space that can be delivered through an engaging content that educates but also emotionally connects people. We've spoken about the shift that needs to happen in the brands and within businesses in terms of how the content is taken as a tool and how it is created within organizations, and that touches a lot of different aspects. Pretty big aspect, actually, eventually. So it just shifts everything, probably.
It's a big one. It's a real big one.
And we've spoken about how lead generation evolved into creating demand, and what are the attributes of creating demand. I think it's been a really great conversation, Rachel, and thank you for sharing some of the insights from the market. And we haven't touched the PR topic, so I'm always I'm looking for somebody to talk about public relations, PR, and how it evolves in the region, and how strong it is in the region, and does it have to change, or is it changing already, the PR?
Yeah, well, I see it kind of like a stagnant place, but I used to be a publicist, and with my years of experience in different things, I started PR when I was fresh out of college, just to understand it. I was a celebrity publicist in LA, walking the red carpet, which is very interesting because those people don't need much PR, but the big studios are spending a lot of money to make sure that they get the PR they need globally to drive sales of the movies. So the foundation of PR remains the same. The interesting thing here that I did not experience in the States, but it could have changed. I've been out of the States for 14 years. So I'm finding publications, which is where you get your PR, any kind of, news, reputable resource. They actually are kind of reaching out to people and just driving revenue for their bottom line through those PR opportunities. So instead of someone just picking up a story because it's a great story, you're finding that people are charging you to publish that story so that you can get that press. So it's very transferable based on money. You got money, you can get PR. It's as simple as that. You see advertorials instead of editorials. It's advertorials. It's an ad that's taken out that's, kind of looks a little bit different, but is not. You're finding award ceremonies where people are getting that credibility and trust. That's basically a lot of times paid through advertising in a publication or so forth, right? So the PR game here is very strong. It is a huge revenue stream for a number of publications. It's easy to buy into, right? It's harder to get into without paying, right? But it overcomes this big challenge of the credibility and trust, depending on what publication you get that credibility from. I was able to build a business with only investing in PR. I built a business. I got 15,000 expats. The highest dip was when I got press in Gulf News, The National. All of a sudden, my numbers went crazy because you're getting eyeballs. People want resources to give them information. The reputable resources are those publications with the high readership. So you need them. You need to get your brands inside of them, right? You need to engage them. And that's why I say, if you have a limited budget, I even would advise getting those getting some of that money into some of the publications that can profile you, that can use video, that can even, tap into their database to expand your exposure to the right demographic, right? And give you digital advertising and a number of different touch points that they have available. So the PR game is strong. It's just now it's evolved to so many different components to help revenue to these publications so that they can still, they can survive.
But do you think, you probably heard about PR is dead or something like, probably it's a misconception. PR has evolved. That's what I'm hearing from you now. It has evolved, how it should evolve to make sure that it still brings the value, but brands can afford actually doing PR versus, for example, you can have your own resources to create content and stories for you, to find that story for you as a brand, right? And to promote and grow your own audience versus, getting into a big publishing house that has got their own audience with that. So how would you evaluate that? How this has to balance between what brands are ready or will be ready to do in the house and grow their own audience and go to the big publishing house?
Well, it's interesting because I'm seeing this, also this evolution of PR agencies. They're not just offering just a press release anymore, or coverage or reporting. They're actually offering digital services,
yes,
content creation.
Yeah.
So now they have to evolve this is what's happening, so that they can provide service for the client. They understand, and they're offering the training for PR, right? So the people that are on camera can provide as well. So you're seeing this evolution within that industry and those service providers, but there's no question it's become a challenge. If you have a limited budget, where do you prioritize? Right? Do you go to the agency, or do you to get the content, or do you go to the publisher to create that content for you? Right? True question. So it really depends on what that conversion is, based on your industry, based on what the relationships are with that PR agency, based on what they're able to drive, what kind of news and customers that you have to actually expose in publishing, right? Because that's another big problem. If you have a customer, but in the banking and finance, if you can't share that customer journey or that expertise and testimonial, you can't use it, right? So how do you use it effectively, right? And still be able to share those stories and those results to drive new business. So it really comes down to your specific budget, what you have available, how often you have it available, and how do you create a strategic, roadmap of how to touch your customers and where they are. Are they new? Have they been in your marketing funnel for a while, or just reaching out with content? Do you have your own community, or do you have to reach out and grab a new community? And so really it comes down to what the sales need to get, what kind of results they desire, right? And that is very unique for every different business, depending on what kind of database, what kind of communication channels they have, and so forth. So again, it's not one answer that's very easy to solve this question.
Exactly.
It becomes, and this is where the consultant comes in, and the expertise of the consultant. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. People are coming with different problems all the time. I had a meeting earlier today. It was with a company of guys. They want to be like, helping. They want to help clients and businesses with providing security products. Okay. So they're doing implementation and so forth, and professional services. That's their forte, and their biggest problem is, how do I get new customers? I'm in this region. We have no customers from this region. How do I get new customers? That's a very unique problem. That's very different from somebody else who says, I got a database and I'm just not touching them. Like another one of my clients, who we created a whole bunch of content for them to just push to this database to remind them to buy, right? To remind them, I'm here when you're ready to buy. So totally different solutions, right? But it's all around lead generation and customer conversions.
Yeah, absolutely. No, totally true. Totally agree. A lot of things have evolved, and you're right. Marketing is just becoming more and more complex, and therefore it requires still requires innovation, frankly.
Absolutely.
I mean, we're moving to a simplicity and resourcefulness. Just because of the complexity and the amount of channels that we have, we're moving to something that can be more holistic and therefore more simple, right? Because it comes down to the same thing, trust and credibility, but we're also looking at resourcefulness of the professionals that are working within the organizations, and how much functions you can cover as one resource, for example.
And you're seeing, as we're going digital and everyone's going automated, and we're getting into, this Web3 idea, you're still going to need people. And you're going to need people with emotional intelligence that are going to be able to make these decisions for you and help decipher between what's the right channel or what's the wrong way to move forward within your business, depending on what you've done so far, and who really have the expertise to bring value so that they can guide you in that decision. And that's where Biz Advisors came from, is you need advice. So get advice from people that have the knowledge and the expertise to give you that, right? Because you can go to an agency or, a PR agent, or let's say a publicist, and they'll give you ideas about PR. But where do you go for a holistic approach about sales and marketing to really understand, the full picture? And so I really appreciate you having me on your show today, because we've talked so many good points, and I think there's so much change happening. So it's great to be at the forefront of that change, especially in the Middle East region, where people are not even just focusing on the GCC, but they're focusing on Europe, they're focusing on Africa, they're focusing on other territories where there's an impact of this digital space globally.
Yeah,
right?
That's true. Yeah, and definitely. Yeah, I like to be a platform where people can actually share their points of view, be open, and be really valuable for, I mean, whatever your audience, my audience. And I want to ask you a last question. So, what do you want? So, what does my audience need to do, can do after listening to this episode to get your service, for example, to get a consultation from you? What can they do? So what would you recommend?
Yeah, they can go to askrachel.info, anything they need. It's very simple to find me, and you're going to find a plethora of different resources to find my knowledge. I'm sharing it on digital on YouTube. I'm sharing it on Instagram. I'm accessible at my website, which is thebizadvisors.com. And that's where you can schedule a call so we can have a run through our evaluation of what exactly your missed opportunities are and where your challenges are so that I can give you the best advice. So, the business is a consultancy business, right? And the model is about providing opportunity, but at the end of the day, it's for lead generation. And a lot of times I feel like that comes to your salespeople that are representing your brand and also how they're selling themselves. So that is a bare minimum quality that you need. And if you're looking for help and you're touching customers and you may not be doing it in the best way to convert them to close business, then you definitely want to reach out to me and get some advice and guidance to do it better.
Amazing. Yeah. And that was Rachel. So follow her on LinkedIn, and don't forget that podcasting is a great way for networking and finding new opportunities for your business and for your personal brand.
Definitely. Thank you again.
Thank you.